Okay, let's get back into Matthew. We are in the Beatitudes, the beginning of the Sermon on the Mount. And remember, this is the first of the 5 discourses given by Jesus recorded in Matthew. The Beatitudes are a series of short, terse sayings of Messiah. And this is a common Jewish way of teaching. And they're probably short. All these little things are probably little short snippets. Have you ever noticed that a lot of his teachings are little short stories or little snippets? And it's probably so they could be easily memorized. They're similar to Proverbs. These Beatitudes are very similar to the Proverbs in that they're really short, wisdom. So it's a brief phrase, but they're very deep, as we found out last week, and we'll find out today.
Bumper stickers.
Yeah. Yep. They're packed with insight and lessons. And they're actually righteous characteristics that are displayed by someone and the blessings that they receive because of them. These characteristics aren't gifts by God, but rather they're traits that these individuals have. These are traits that we should have. As we go through these and we learn about them, we need to understand that these are traits that should reflect the child of God. The Beatitudes should be describing us, the followers of Jesus. We are the ones who are blessed, but sometimes we don't feel so blessed. Remember, each one it says, "Blessed are you." Well, that's us. But it doesn't feel like a blessing in a lot of times.
I think the persecuted,
Mm-hmm.
The poor in heart doesn't sound like.
Yeah.
To be poor in heart's a blessing.
Yeah, exactly. And so it makes you think of being blessed. I wrote an example in here. You may have experienced something like this, but usually when you see someone, they call you or send you an email. How you doing? I don't know about you, but sometimes it's like I just start off negative. Oh, this happened or that happened. I think that's just kind of a knee-jerk reaction that we have. It's almost like we don't want to say the good. One of my little brothers, I remember going back and visiting him, and I always felt bad for leaving Texas and all my family's there. So one time. And that was kind of the habit. Like whenever they'd ask me, "So how's it going?" I'd always say the negative stuff. In Colorado, I was like, "Oh, it snows or it's windy." And we moved out here. My brother says, "So how do you like it? Or what's it like up there?" I said, "It rains." And he's like, "Why are you there?" He says, "All you do is complain about that place. Why'd you even go?" He goes, and his twin moved to New Mexico. He said, "Matthew's the same way. You just complain about where you're at." And I'm thinking, well, I'm saying that to make him feel better.
That's right,
I don't want to say like, "I mean, I'm loving it. I'm sure I'm glad I'm not over there." But I think, he's right. And I think that's something that we need to do as Christians. I've known several Christians that are like that. "How you doing?" "Oh, I'm blessed."
Mm-hmm.
And they just have the good attitude. And they're like, "Oh yeah, I'm just blessed by God." And I think that's where we need to be, and just get out of the, get out of the negative mentality, even though that's what's always on our mind. Bills, messed up car, messed up house, messed up, or whatever. We're always thinking about these things, but we need to exude the blessedness that we have as a disciple.
They're tricking us, and to do success right now is. You could almost be afraid to be successful because you're that guy that's a white privilege, or you're, everything. The have-nots hate the haves. Mm-hmm. So to boast, like I ran into a guy in a bar, a young guy from El Salvador. This has been 10 years ago, but it still just stopped me in my tracks. We're talking about it, and he said, "Do you ever feel guilty?"
Yes, you felt guilty.
Yeah, and I'm trying to whoop him in pool. I'm going to win right now, too, again. Don't you feel guilty about, because other people, like being that guy that got to do that?
Right, yeah.
And I was like Chinese, man. I didn't even understand what he was saying. But you can feel it now.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Anything that you've done, it's not because of hard work or you've earned it. It's just that guy has. Mm-hmm. We don't.
But if you allow yourself to get baited into a situation like that, you're the only one at fault.
Say again?
If you allow yourself to be baited into that situation, such as being white privilege or brown privilege, I don't care. You didn't do the hard work that I did to get there.
That's right.
There's the door. Have a great day.
Yeah. I'm trying to make that okay and the norm to not feel. If you're happy,
you know what?
You must be something wrong with you
As
because you're
long
supposed
as
to
you
feel that.
allow yourself to go that way, then you're going to have that guilt.
Yeah.
Don't.
And that
I don't.
is,
I just see the world doing that.
and that is the psychology of the world.
Yes.
Is that it's not your fault that you're in your situation that you're in. It's because of your skin color. It's because of the neighborhood you grew up in. It's because it's not your fault. But when we look at as a disciple of Jesus, he's saying forgive. He's saying look to me. And so that is we're not supposed to look at our situation and say this is the reason. No, if I'm angry at someone, well, I need to forgive them. If I've hurt someone, I need to ask for forgiveness. You know, we can't put ourselves in that situation because we look to God for our standard.
And we can't help them change their minds if we treat them the same way they're treating us.
Yeah.
We have to be above that.
Yep.
And show by example.
Yep.
And I will never apologize for who I am or the way God created me.
Right.
With this melanin in my skin, that I'm native, because to apologize for that is to say that God was wrong.
Yeah. Yeah. You're right.
And that goes for everybody who's created.
Exactly.
You know,
I wish people would.
Yeah.
I can find there's a lot of nasty, unchristian people out there.
well,
Claim to be Christians.
my parents didn't raise us speaking Spanish because they were born and raised there in Texas, and in the elementary schools that they were part of, if they got caught speaking Spanish, they'd be sit in the corner, or they'd get spanked, or they would, you know, they wanted, there was like a forced assimilation.
Yeah.
You couldn't speak Spanish. So when they raised us, when they got married and raised us, they agreed not to teach us Spanish because they didn't want us to go through that same thing.
Wow.
But they sent us to a Catholic school, and it was all various races. It was Eastern Indians, Asians, us, the Mexicans, and there was blacks and whites. I mean, it was a whole mixture. And most of us went from first grade to eighth grade together. In fact, a lot of us are still friends on Facebook, and everyone, those back and forth are still getting together and having coffee or drinks or whatever in the evening. But it wasn't until I was in my late 20s or so that I was reflecting back as a child, and I was the poor kid. I realized everyone there was affluent. And my mom volunteered there, and I think she was like a teacher's aide, and I think that helped reduce our tuition. But also, I would get donated pants. I had pants that belonged to other kids, had patches on them or whatever. And I thought, man, I was the poor kid in there. But the funny thing is, the neighborhood that we moved into, my dad had a house built, and it's an old neighborhood, and all the kids in the neighborhood thought I was a rich kid. Because I went to the Catholic school, and I lived in a brick house, and they all lived in, this other house. Yeah, and so...
In school, did you think, you said you were looking back at it, but in school, did you think you were the poor kid? No.
No, it never crossed my mind. And I never considered race. I never considered...
Yeah, exactly.
I never thought about that until I went to public high school. And then, all of us Mexicans from the Mexican neighborhood rode the bus together, and then I tried to fit in, because I wore uniforms all through from kindergarten to 8th grade.
Right.
So when it came to choosing clothes, I let my mom choose my clothes in 9th grade, and I thought, man, I'm a nerd. I want to be like the rest of these guys, I wanted to be like the other Mexican guys and dress like a lowrider. That didn't work. And then I wanted to be like the prep guys, because I liked the shirts with the alligator on them, but couldn't afford that. And then, I tried to be a couple of these different groups. I ended up being just a guy in a T-shirt and jeans like I still am today. And I found my group of misfits of, again, multiracial group. All of us didn't fit into our racial groups, and so we would kind of, bounce around. The same thing happened in the Army, too. I didn't fit in with all the other groups. We would rotate through them all, but anyway, I was just looking back at all that and just thinking how, it was just a different time.
Right.
You were going to say, though, that when because of that, them seeing you do that, and you came over here, they had a false impression of that you were wealthy. So they could hold that against you, like you got it handed to you.
Yeah, and that's what the kids in the neighborhood they
thought you were.
Yeah, well your family has all this money, and I remember them saying that. I'm thinking, no, because whenever I ask my mom for something, she says we don't have the money for it. Where do you think that we have? Why do you think that we have money? Because we have. I mean, but what I realized one evening, what I did have that all my friends didn't have, was a dad in the home. Wow. One day I couldn't go out and play because I needed to help my dad work on the car. And I was grumping, okay, I got to hold the light. I never hold it in the right position. That is. So I'm over there holding the light, and then one by one my friends came over because it was a Friday night and we wanted to go and hang out, play football, whatever. And they all gathered around the car, and then my dad would pause every now and then and talk, and he starts telling his Vietnam stories. And of course, all the guys are just listening to those stories, and they're just focused on them. Then my mom came out and said, "Hey, take the trash to the curb." So I took the trash to the curb, and as I'm walking back up the sidewalk, all those guys are sitting around, listening. Yeah, just looking at my dad, listening to him, and each one of them, as I'm going around, thinking, his dad's dead, his dad's in Mexico, his dad left him, his dad, all of them. Yeah. Didn't have a father in their life.
It kind of hit you when you saw that.
Yeah.
How many children
I was
in your
grateful.
Family?
5. I've got an older brother and an older sister and 2 younger brothers.
Mike, that's 5.
How many what?
That's 5.
In case you didn't know Spanish.
Didn't I say 5? But yeah, I mean, we can't look at, because I could look at my past and I could look at my upbringing and come up with a bunch of negative things. Yeah. But we can't look at our past and say, because of this, it's the way I am. I know Christians who do that. Well, this is just the way I am because I cuss. That's just the way I am.
I believe in choices. Everything's a choice.
Yeah, and our choices. We're told how to live. Mm-hmm. So you change that. Jesus died so you don't have to do that anymore.
Right.
And so we have to make those changes. And so we have to find those things, and whether it is because, our parents were mean or they left us or, we were divorced or siblings hate us or whatever it might be, we can't blame the rest of our life on that. Holding grudges like that, having that bitterness is just not what Jesus did for us. He died so we can forgive, and we're forgiven so that we can serve Him. Mm-hmm. And so, no matter...
Happy. You can't be happy when you're doing all that other bad stuff.
Rejoice. In fact, the last biblical festival that we celebrated, that's what it says in the Scriptures. You shall rejoice. It's a command to rejoice for those 7 days.
Mm. Wow, that's good.
Well, here in Matthew 5:16 it says, "Let your light shine before men in such a way that they may see your good works and glorify your Father who's in heaven."
What do you think good works? What are good works?
Well, I think it's the light that you shine, because if you really love and aren't bitter and things, it kind of shows.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
You either like people or you don't.
And plus, it shows something different than maybe what they're used to.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So they know you're different. Mm-hmm. It sets you apart.
But he's saying, what are the works?
What are they?
You're talking about
helping people.
Just being different,
kind,
being a Christian, being what it following Christ. What would He do? What would she do?
Yeah. I mean, for me, I am so happy. The other day, it happens once in a while. A guy, I'm unloading my car, or I'm putting the groceries in my car, and he says, "Can I take that for you?" Mm-hmm. The cart. Yeah. So I have to walk all the way to take it.
Like, no, the milk.
And I'm like, oh You know, that is a blessing to me.
Yeah.
And he is showing his light.
Yeah.
Were you at Costco when they were out of carts?
You know what? Though, on Monday I was at Costco and they put everything in a box and it was so heavy I couldn't lift it out on my. So I was going to start taking them out one at a time, and a guy came by and said, "Can I put that in your truck for you?"
Yeah.
Trunk for you, and I said,
it's just that's the way we should be living. Yeah.
Yeah, it's just the way. Yeah, exactly.
Every day.
Well,
what we can do for somebody.
It's a blessing to everybody all around. It's a blessing to you. It's a blessing to the
them
other
for
person.
And somebody else sees them doing that
Yeah.
and think, "Wow, that was nice of him."
Mo,
You know?
you should take
Yeah.
phone and go up to Albertsons because they just stopped using bags, and half the people coming out of there won't know they won't have a bag, so they're going to be carrying stuff.
Well, no, they have
Could
bags.
be funny.
They have bags, paper bags.
Yeah,
They're
you
charging
use
for them.
paper still.
Yeah.
You know,
They're
they're
making
going
sense for
There's
it.
gonna be. I'd be like,
It was interesting. I had a choice of plastic or
You just leave
paper.
it in the
Really?
car
And I
and then put it in the
Yeah,
car.
I just cleaned my car and I'd put my bags back in the trunk. You know, when I
Yeah.
got there, I was like, darn. So, but they were 8 cents.
And
a
isn't it
piece.
crazy though that we can do that again now? When it's supposed to be such a crisis.
And now we're taking
Now
I
we
went-
can take our
I
own bags
thought.
in there again.
Here's what I thought today. I was
Oh.
driving and I thought the same thing. So they want us to take stuff from our home to there now, but we have a virus. So
Yeah.
then I started thinking, well, then you'd come up with something that was just a one-time use. To not have to use stuff that was full of the virus. You wouldn't want to bring that back and forth to the house. So we played this one-time plastic bag. And I started thinking syringes. They're like one-time plastic things. Boom. So why are they attacking the bags? We've been recycling bags for years.
Well, as far as I'm concerned, they could get rid of all the plastic bottles, plastic bags,
We
plastic
could not
straws.
survive without plastic.
Oh yeah, we
Those
could.
are
No.
my litter bags.
Yeah.
And my
really
Okay.
bad.
Let's figure out something else.
Let's see what Matthew says about
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
About
All right.
litter bags.
I always get us nice enough topic.
Okay.
So weird.
So
Sorry, Lord. This is how
I have. When someone asks how are you doing, how often do you begin with the negatives? Okay, I talked about that.
You're going to talk about meek.
Now, yes, we're going to get to the meek.
Chinese.
I've heard some folks say that since they've been walking with the Lord, they have not seen God's blessings in their lives. And they say, where are the blessings? Why is it hard to see blessings? Maybe some folks have scales over their eyes that prevent them from to see the blessings, and sometimes the influence of the culture around us will distort our understanding of God's blessings. You know, we look at other people, well, they got a bigger house than mine, they got a nicer car than me, they got a better job than me. Why do they get the blessings? Mm-hmm. Well, why is that a blessing? Or sometimes you perceive someone having a blessing until you get some insight into their life, and you're like, oh man, they're really struggling. They're putting on a good, outward show that, but it's not always a blessing. But I think it's the culture around us. The media distorts what it means to be blessed. Mm-hmm. Commercials and advertisements tell us what we really need in order to feel fulfilled, in order to be blessed. Right? When we watch TV, all the commercials, you need this detergent, or you need this, I think I've told you about our Muslim neighbors back in Colorado, and the mom was a wonderful cook, but the kids wanted Eggo waffles. They wanted sugar cereal. They wanted the stuff that they saw on TV, and the kids at school were eating. They didn't want their mom's good home cooked meals. They wanted the boxes of the average, and not the generic brand. It had to be, the name brand box. If we don't have their products, then we aren't really blessed. If we don't wear the name brands, we're not really blessed. If we don't vacation at certain places, we're not really blessed. If we don't drive the newest and fastest car, and on and on. That's what advertisements are designed to do. They make us desire to fit in. Everyone wants to fit in somewhere, and by fitting in and living the true American dream, it means that we're truly blessed. And I think that is what we tend to do is we look at the American dream. While I love this country, I can't think of another country I'd rather live. The American dream is not the biblical dream.
Mm-hmm.
And we can get caught up in the rat race of trying to have the best home and have the American dream.
Keeping up with the Joneses.
Yes, exactly. So we need to be careful of that. So if the blessings in our lives are measured by the media and their culture around us, if we're allowing the world to determine what it means to be blessed, then we will not see the blessings that God actually has for us now. This is one of my blessings right here. Mm-hmm. Having my family with me. My granddaughter comes over. Even though I love my house, it's a burden. The house is a burden. Having to fix it and do things, and I'm working all day. Then I come home to fix stuff, and it's like I want to be with the family. It's like so many things, so many projects that need to be done that I feel like are just a waste of time. Mm-hmm. Sometimes we have to pull ourselves out of the world to actually see the blessings that we already have. Instead of trying to make God fit into our modern world, instead of trying to make His blessings look like something that we desire, we need to first change our perspective. What is it that God is really blessing me with? But don't get me wrong, I do believe that God can and will bless us materially. I mean, there's nothing wrong with having a good car that's not going to break down. There's nothing wrong with having a house that's not going to leak. But gaining material things or monetary wealth does not always mean it's a blessing. How many times have you heard of people who win the lottery? They win millions of dollars and then their life falls apart. They actually end up worse off than what they were to begin with. That's hardly a blessing. Even movie stars or the musicians, they become multimillionaires, end up being on drugs, and then then their life is just a wreck. So having money isn't always a blessing. Sometimes it can be a curse. Mm-hmm. And I've seen stories like that where people win the lottery, and then all their family attacks them. They want money, and then they end up in debt. Crazy debt because they thought they can buy a Lamborghini and mansions and stuff.
The only people, and I'm old, so I've met a lot of people. The only people that I've ever noticed that handle wealth pretty well are Christians. Non-Christians, their money a lot of times they just want more and more and more, so it makes them miserable. But Christians look at it as a blessing.
Yeah, we should.
And for doing the right things,
Right. And I've heard people say, that when they get money, they give it away. And because they're so free to bless others with it, God keeps using them. God keeps giving them money because they're not keeping it for themselves. They're using it to expand His kingdom.
That's why I don't have more.
Yeah.
I've been giving enough away.
Well, and that is so true, because when we were younger and we didn't have anything, we could barely have a savings account, And then you get to where we are now, and you have years of investments, years of putting money away that you never got to use. You did it, but you didn't use it. And now I've got that money there, but it's like, how do I do this evenly? Mm-hmm. How am I going to leave? Who am I going to leave this to? What am I going to do here? And then you worry about losing it. The stock market could crash. The investments can be gone. And it's just like are you kidding me?
It doesn't make you happy.
I mean,
we knew two ladies. They were the same age. One of them had 9 children. The other one didn't have any children. And the one with 9 children, she lived in a small, modest apartment. And every year she went for 2 months down to Columbia and worked in an orphanage. The same orphanage every year. And then also she would volunteer at different churches. The other lady didn't have any children. Her husband left her, but he was paying her alimony, a very handsome amount. In fact, she's a lady that we lived with for a while. But she had a routine, going up to Central City, up in the mountains where you can gamble. Certain days she would go gamble, other days she'd play mahjong, other days she would, play cards or whatever. But all of her life was based on entertainment. And when she got home, she had already scheduled, she's going to watch this movie, this movie, this movie. And I was just amazed at the comparison of these two ladies. One of them was just self-giving. You go into her apartment, and it was just, she didn't have much. She didn't have much decorations or anything, because all she did was, she was never there, really. She would just go out and serve the Lord. And the other lady, all she did was entertainment. And it was just such a contrast to see that. What are we living for? Who are we living for?
Who was the happiest?
Yes, exactly. And Polly was very happy. I mean, I think most of her children had moved out of the state, but she was happy being around other children and working in nurseries and working in the orphanages.
Yeah.
So,
yeah,
and she's had that heart, So it's good to have that, or even like what Cindy's doing here, hospitality, opening up her home, what she's been blessed with, so that we can come together and hear the word. So it's good to identify what is it that we have that we can use for the betterment of those around us, for the expansion of the kingdom. And that's why I love doing this. I want to try to what I've learned. I want to share. So it's what is it that we have that we can give back to the kingdom, to bless. My buddy used to always say, "I'm blessed to be a blessing." Whenever he'd help me out, I'd say, "Thank you, Peter." He's like, "I'm blessed to be a blessing," and that's how we need to feel, instead of getting something in return. Me and my buddy Ernie, he was helping me become a pastor, and we would go and visit people in homes, and we would show up, and again, there's these little single ladies that didn't have much in these small apartments, and they'd make you tea and a little biscuit or something, and it's just such a blessing to see that they were willing to put whatever they had together to make you feel at home and to bless you. And my buddy Ernie told me, he says, you'll see every time we go and we visit someone, we're going to bless them, but we're going to leave blessed. And he was right. I mean, just going to some of these people that didn't have much at all, and they did what they could to bless us. And you do leave ministered to, even though you went to go and pray for them.
Sounds a lot like Jim. He's been a blessing to me for sure.
This is what he has, what we don't have.
Right, yeah. Yeah. Okay. But sometimes God does bless us materially or financially. When you don't think there's enough to make the bills, and sometimes we've seen that in the past, like, man, I don't know how we're going to pay the bills, and all of a sudden there's money. It's like, wow, praise God. And sometimes you see physical, material blessings here today, but it's not the only way that God blesses us. Remember, Jesus said the poor in spirit are blessed. The poor in spirit, right? The bankrupt in spirit. The person who has realized that he cannot make it without help from God. So they put their faith and trust in Him and Him alone, and in doing this, they're blessed. They're blessed with the kingdom of heaven. And, if we need to put that in perspective. That is what we are blessed with right now, is the kingdom of heaven. We have been given eternal life. And if we can't find that a blessing every morning when we wake up, I mean, we're not focusing on the right things. We need to wake up every morning and say, you know what? Jesus died for me. I'm going to live with Him for eternity. I'm going to make this the best day. But no, we're cranky about, I don't know, whatever it is that's bothering us. Yeah. Oh no, I can't. Yeah, that has gotten me cranky. I still got to do some finishing touches on my deck.
So give me an example of someone poor in spirit. A scenario or.
Like all of us, we've realized that we can't do it without Him.
It's just acknowledging that.
Yes, it's basically another way of saying humble.
Yeah, humble.
Someone who is saying, I can't do it alone. But the opposite is the unbelievers out there who are saying,
yeah, you don't need God.
Yeah, that's dumb. What, you're going to waste your time reading a Bible? That's old. That's written by man. or they come up with all kinds of stuff. So they haven't come to a place where they're on their knees saying, God, I need you.
So you bought in.
Yes.
A really quick story. When Tim turned pro, when he was playing soccer, and young, good looking, my girlfriend said, we went to a class reunion, and my girlfriend said something about Tim, and I said, he accepted the Lord. I said he was baptized. And she looked at me and she went, what a waste. And I didn't say another thing, but she went through some really bad times in her life. But at the end, I found out she had passed away, and I went to the funeral, and she loved the Lord so much. Somewhere in between that, from being that person that said, what a waste, to the rest of her life, she served the Lord all the time, and was, it just made my heart so glad that she finally realized,
Yeah.
I never knew that story.
I did.
That's hilarious.
That was Luana.
Yeah. Yeah, it's too bad that people see things that way, but thankfully the Lord got a hold of her.
Yep, amen.
Okay. So we've talked about that last week. Being poor in spirit. So let's get into our passage. Let's read the first 6 verses of Matthew. Again, Matthew 5. And we'll dig into the Beatitudes a little bit more. Matthew 5, 1 through 6. When Jesus saw the crowds, he went up to the mountain, and after he sat down, his disciples came to him. He opened his mouth and began to teach them, saying, Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are those who mourn, for they shall be comforted. Blessed are the gentle, for they shall inherit the earth. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they shall be satisfied. So there are varying opinions on who Jesus is speaking to. The text opens up, it says, after he sat down, his disciples came to him, and he opened his mouth and began to teach them. Who are the them? Some say the whole group, the whole large group of people who were following him is who he was talking to. Others say it was only the disciples, the ones who he had recruited. And some say he was talking to both. One commentary says that the first 8 Beatitudes are for everyone there, the whole group of people and his disciples. He's talking to everyone. But the very last one, verses 11 through 12, is only for his closest disciples. And we'll talk about that when we get there. But that's just an interesting point to think about. But the last 2 verses of this discourse make it clear who he was speaking to. When it says in Matthew 7 and verse 28, remember the whole Sermon on the Mount goes through Matthew 7. Matthew 7 and verse 28 says, When Jesus had finished these words, the crowds were amazed at his teaching, for he was teaching them. So he was teaching all of them. He was speaking to everybody. So, and as we go through the Bible, that's one way to, whenever you dig into a book, who's the author writing to? We need to understand the context of it. Who is he writing to? Why is he writing it? We need to have all of these questions in mind as we go through it. And yes, we can glean from it, but we always need to know who the audience is. That's why we ask these questions.
Can you remind real quick how the verse 3 said 11 and 3 go together or equal?
Oh, yeah.
3 and 11, 4 and 10, 5 and 9, 6 and 8, and 7's the middle, central.
Yes, 7's the center.
7's what it's centered around.
Yes,
yeah.
The mercy.
The Beatitudes.
Oh, did I say it too fast?
No, I just wanted to...
3 and 11.
So another detail to note here in verse 1 and 2 is that all 6 clauses begin with the pronoun he or his. When it says when Jesus, my translation here says Jesus, that's the NASB, but it just says he. The name Jesus isn't there. When he saw the crowds, he went up on the mountain, and after he sat down, his disciples came to him. He opened his mouth and began to teach them. So it's clear that this is his teaching being taught in the way that he was teaching it. It's all about Jesus. These are his words, and therefore we need to heed them. Remember, Matthew showed us in the first 4 chapters who Jesus is. He is the Messiah, the Son of God. And who he is key to what he's teaching. Okay, he is the Messiah, and he's not going to go against the rest of the Bible. Okay, verse 5. Blessed are the gentle. We're finally here. Blessed are the gentle, for they shall inherit the earth. Again, I'm in the New American Standard Translation. Gentle, this is the Greek word praus. I think that's how you pronounce it. It has the basic meaning of not being overly impressed by a sense of one's importance. Okay, so you're not like overly important about yourself. You're not proud, I guess. Strong defines it as the Strong's Dictionary Concordance defines it as mildness of disposition, gentleness of spirit, or meekness. So meek, the definition that I've heard of meek is like strength under control. Like like if you're with a little child, you could just pummel them. If you're with a weaker person, you can just pummel them down, but you're under control. You know how to control your strength. You think about walking next to a big animal, a horse that could just trample you, big giant animal. Matthew uses the same word in chapter 11 and verse 29. He says, "Take my yoke upon you and learn from me." This is Jesus talking. "For I am gentle and humble in heart." So what is the metaphor used in the verse? It's a farm metaphor. He says, "Take my yoke upon you." A yoke is used to join two animals, two oxen together for plowing or pulling, basically for working. So you yoke two animals together, and then together they plow a field. The idea is that Jesus is going to put his yoke on us. Mm-hmm. He says, "Take my yoke upon." Like one side is on him, and he's saying, "Put this on you." Okay, if he's yoking us to himself, he's going to do his work. He's going to do the work, but he's going to be gentle about it. Okay, so like if I put some kind of yoke on me and Mo, and I just started running across the field and dragging him and pulling him along, that's not being gentle. But what Jesus is doing is that he is going to be gentle with us about it. He's not overly impressed by his own sense of importance. He's putting us first. He's not saying, "Keep up with me, I'm God." He's saying, "No, I know who you are. I know your abilities. So I'm putting you first." He's concerned about us. He's not going to be a cruel farmer with a heavy yoke working us to death. He's gentle. The word also used in the Septuagint translation of Zechariah 9 and verse 9. Remember what the Septuagint is? From about 300 to 150 BC, they translated the Old Testament that was in Hebrew into Greek. And by the time of the first century, when Jesus was around, that Greek translation was the Bible that they used. Okay, so the Old Testament that they had in Jesus' time was a Greek translation. So whenever they would quote from the Bible, they would use the Septuagint, the Greek translation of the Old Testament.
So Septuagint? Septuagint
means 70, because they say there was 70 translators that translated it. You might see it abbreviated as LXX, the Roman numeral LXX. It's just 70. Yeah. So in Zechariah 9 and verse 9, in the Septuagint translation, it says, "Say to the daughter of Zion, behold, your king is coming to you, gentle, and mounted on a donkey." So first of all, kings don't come riding on donkeys. They enter with the typical pomp and circumstance. They make a scene. It's a ceremony when the king arrives. But this king is not overly impressed by his own sense of importance. Okay, he's humble. He's gentle. He's meek. Peter also uses this word instructing women not to adorn themselves with outward beauty alone, but, he says in 1 Peter 3 and verse 4, "Let it be the hidden person of the heart with the imperishable quality of a gentle and quiet spirit, which is precious in the sight of God." The context of the passage gives the sense of submissiveness that the wife demonstrates towards her husband. So this word gentle can generally mean humble, meek, gentle, and even submissive. But also in the context of our beatitude, it can mean the powerless, those who cannot defend themselves, those who cannot fight for themselves, When the powerless put their faith and trust in God for their protection in times of persecution, they demonstrate a meek spirit. In all the definitions for this word gentle, we can see Jesus as the model for them all. He demonstrated for us what it looks like to be humble, meek, gentle, and submissive, and even powerless. He didn't fight back when he was persecuted. Okay, so that's the first part of our beatitude. Let's look at the second part. For they shall inherit the earth. Blessed are the gentle, for they shall inherit the earth. The word used here for earth would be better translated as land. For they shall inherit the land, which is probably a reference to the land they were in, Israel. Okay, the promised land of God. I keep forgetting which group I'm teaching here. Back in the Old Testament, a lot of the times, when they would get kicked out of the land of Israel, it was because Israel as a nation was being disobedient to God. They were allowing pagan worship in, and they weren't keeping their side of the covenant. And so part of the covenant blessing was if they obeyed God, they could live in the land. So when they would disobey God, He'd say, "Out of my land," and he'd kick them out of the land. So a gentle person here will inherit the land. This translation would make more sense to us considering the author, the audience, and the person doing the speaking, which is Jesus. The audience would make the connection that the land is talking about Israel. Inheriting the land is regularly connected to obeying the commandments of God. We see this in the conclusion of the second part of Deuteronomy 11 and verse 12. It basically says, obey the commandments of God so that your days and the days of your sons may be multiplied on the land which the Lord swore to your fathers to give them, as long as the heavens are above the earth. Also, we see Moses intercede for Israel. He asks God to remember Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, your servants, to whom you swore by yourself, and said to them, I will multiply your descendants as the stars of heaven, and all the land of which I have spoken I shall give to your descendants, and they shall inherit it forever. That's Exodus 32 and verse 13.
Mike?
Yes.
Sorry to interrupt, but that brings up a question then. In light of Bible prophecy, I always thought the gentle, meaning, the believers will inherit the earth. But that's what a lot of Bible scholars teach. But that doesn't seem to apply, actually.
We'll get to that.
Thrown a curve into my thinking.
We'll get to that here in a minute. We'll get to the believer. Where does the non-Jew fit into this understanding?
Yeah, thank you.
So the land was promised inheritance to the physical descendants of Jacob. The same theme of inheriting the land is throughout the prophets. Isaiah 49 and verse 8, 57 and verse 13, Zechariah 8 and verse 12, and in the Psalms as well. Specifically Psalm 37, where we can see a clear connection with this beatitude. Here's a few select verses. Verse 9 from Psalm 37. For evildoers will be cut off, but those who wait for the Lord, they will inherit the land. Verse 11. But the humble will inherit the land and will delight themselves in abundant prosperity. Verse 22. For those blessed by him will inherit the land, but those cursed by him will be cut off. Verse 29, the righteous will inherit the land and dwell in it forever. Verse 34, wait for the Lord and keep his way, and he will exalt you to inherit the land. When the wicked are cut off, you will see it.
That application is still to the Jew, right?
Well, this is Psalm 37. Here's the thing. You have Abraham wasn't a Jew. Right? He didn't. His great grandson was Judah. From Judah, you get the Jews. So Abraham was a Hebrew. Isaac and Jacob were Hebrews, and even all the 12.
That was pretty synonymous.
It's kind of it kind of is. The promise was made to Abraham, and through Abraham, it is said that all the nations of the earth will be blessed. Okay. And so, and that is because through Abraham was going to come the Messiah, Jesus. And even when Jesus, all throughout the Gospels, we see Jesus saying, don't go talk to the Gentiles. I've only come for the lost tribes or the lost sheep of Israel. I've only come for my own. It wasn't until after he died, resurrected, ascended into heaven, he gave the Holy Spirit to his disciples. So now they opened up the floodgates. Now let the Gentiles in. And even that's what Paul talks about, is that the blinders on those Jews that didn't accept Jesus are going to be there until the fullness of the Gentiles comes in. And then Paul even also says in Romans that not all Israel is Israel. And he talks about the natural, he talks about the olive tree of Israel and the branches that are broken off, which are the Jews that didn't accept Jesus. And then we are the wild olive branches that are grafted into Israel. So, as a believer in Jesus, we are fellow heirs, Paul says. Mm-hmm. We're fellow heirs of the promises of God. We're grafted into Israel. And when you graft a tree into another tree, it becomes
one tree.
That tree.
We're joint heirs.
We're Israel. We're joined, and we become. It's like when someone marries into a family, they become part of that family. Or you adopt a child, that becomes your child. You didn't birth the child, but that's your child.
Right.
And so Israel was adopted just like the Gentiles were. Mm-hmm. And so even though, it looks like a lot of these promises are going to the natural-born people, the Hebrews, and yes, there's a purpose for those people. Even when Jesus returns, on all the 12 gates to enter Jerusalem, it has a name of each of the tribes. So there's still a purpose for the natural-born people, but that's where we have to say, okay, God made certain people for certain things. He didn't make me a woman. He didn't make women men. So we shouldn't desire after what other people get or the places that they had them. I'm not a firstborn. I never desire for my brother's status as the firstborn. So we have to be content with where we are and who, what place God has put us in. And so that's kind of how I'm able to, in my mind, understand all this. So only got a couple pages here. Inheriting the land is the blessing for those who are humble, obedient, and righteous. That's what we see that in that psalm. So it's awesome to see that Jesus is saying again these things that have already been said in the psalm. So when Jesus says, "Blessed are the gentle, for they will inherit the land," we can see another allusion to the future ingrafting of the Gentiles. He's telling us that one's righteous character is proof of his or her covenantal membership. The gentle are those who inherit the land, not simply the physical descendants of Jacob. Remember when John the Immerser, John the Baptist, told the religious leaders who came out to be immersed, he says, "Bear fruit in keeping with repentance, and do not suppose that you can say to yourself, 'We have Abraham for our father,' for I say to you that from these stones God is able to raise up children to Abraham." So covenant membership, being in covenant with God, is more than just lineage. You have to be obedient. You have to bear fruit. Inheriting the land is more than just lineage. You have to be obedient. See, and that's why in the first century, most people think the Jews were keeping the law in order to be saved. No, they thought they were saved because they were Jews. And that's why they were trying to get Gentiles to convert. They were saying, okay, you believe in Jesus, but you still need to convert. You still need to become a Jew. But isn't the land only for the physical descendants of Jacob, the 12 tribes of Israel? That's what people would say. Didn't we just read that Moses said, "All this land of which I have spoken I will give to your descendants"? Well, isn't this a reference to the native-born people? The answer is yes. But once we put our faith in Jesus, we are then grafted into Israel. We become part of Israel. Therefore, we have an inheritance to the land. We see a picture of this in Ezekiel 47. This passage is understood to be in the millennial reign of Messiah. Jesus is back on the earth, and he's reigning from Jerusalem in this new temple. When he returns...
Does that mean we're part inheritance for the land of Israel? Or...
Yeah, check it out.
Or all the earth? I mean...
Well, watch.
Saved Christians aren't going to be moving to Jerusalem, are they?
You could. That's what it says in Ezekiel. Ezekiel 47 verse 21. So you shall divide this land among yourselves according to the tribes of Israel. And again, this is why I'm saying that there's still a place for the Jews or the Hebrews, because the Levitical priests are serving again in the temple. And this is supposed to be in the millennial reign when Jesus is reigning in Ezekiel 47. The land is divided according to the tribes of Israel, the physical descendants of Jacob. These are 12 areas named after each tribe. And so now all of Israel is going to be divided up into those tribes. Jewish people today don't know what tribe they're from. They don't know, not unless your last name is Levi or Cohen, which means priest. So you know you're possibly from the priestly line. And then verse 22. You shall divide it by lot for an inheritance among yourselves and among the aliens who stay in your midst, who bring forth sons in your midst. So the aliens are the non-native born. Okay? And the aliens are those who, they want to live with Israel. They want to follow Israel's God. They attach themselves. They're the ones that are grafted in. The inheritance is both for the native born and the alien. It says, and they shall be to you as the native born among the sons of Israel. They shall be allotted an inheritance with you among the tribes of Israel. So the Gentiles get to choose. I want to be in this tribe. Okay, you're now part of this tribe. Okay, now you get a piece of land. You get part of the land.
Wow.
So we're grafted in. We've become part of it. The aliens are not native born, nor do they become native born. They still maintain their ethnicity. And that's why the United States is a picture of that. You know, I'm an American. I was born here. I served in the Army. I pay my taxes. I vote. I'm part of this place. I can say that George Washington, Abraham Lincoln, the founding fathers are my founding fathers. I'm a part of this country. But I've got Mexican ethnicity. I've got Mexican heritage. You know, no one here is like, even the native borns, the natives came here. You know, I mean, but we're now part of this. We're now a part of the nation, and that's how it's going to be with Israel. No one's going to be better than anyone else. We're all going to be part of it. We're all going to have a part to play.
We get to pick our tribe.
Yeah.
That's better than the ones that know who their tribe is. They don't get the choice.
Yeah.